Welcome to the Will Caminada podcast. Here's the place to find support and guidance on your spiritual awakening and healing journey. It is my mission to help you awaken, heal, and expand your consciousness. Hello, beautiful soul. Thank you so much for choosing to listen to the Will Caminada podcast. In this solocast episode, I will tackle 3 questions. First, what is the 4D level of consciousness? Second, what is the Akashic records? And finally, how are they related? And at the end of the episode, as usual, I will talk about how having this awareness can be beneficial in our lives and in our healing journeys. Just a quick request before I get into today's topic. Please make sure you hit the subscribe button in whatever platform you listen to your podcasts so that you never miss any future content. And I would also really appreciate it if you could take a moment of your time and leave a review on my podcast on Apple Podcast, because when you do this, you help me reach more beautiful souls and help fellow humans to expand their consciousness. Now, a little disclaimer before I talk about the 4D and the Akashic records. I understand it's quite a big topic. A lot of people have studied about it. They might have different perspectives and opinions. So I'm here just to share my personal perspective based on my research and my life experiences and my intuition, my understanding, my connection with my guides. And also I want to give credit here. A lot of the stuff that I share about this topic, especially the expansion of consciousness, has been taken from the book The Alchemy of 9 Dimensions of Consciousness by Barbara Hand-Clow, who actually channeled all this information from the Pleiadians. And some of the content that I'll share today I've also found in a show called Initiation on Gaia TV. His name is Matias Di Stefano, and I learned so much from his content and from this show in particular, and I love Gaia, so I highly recommend Gaia and his shows. All right, so let's talk about the 4th dimension of consciousness. And I've talked about it on episode 28 called 3D, 4D, 5D Explained. So you can check that out either now or after the episode. I think either way, but I definitely recommend that you listen to that, because then the pieces are put together and you might have some aha moments. But simply put, the 4D is the realm of the collective mind, of the expanded notion of time and of the feelings. So it's the bridge between the 3D, the realm of linear space and time, which we know, which that's where we are, and the 5D, the realm of love and heart chakra, and that's where we're shifting to individually and as a planet. And again, I talk more about it in that episode. There is another episode that I talk mostly about shifting into 5D. It's a 2-part episode. I believe it's 21 and 22. It's a 2-part episode, 21, 22. You can check that out too after this. The 4D is really a pivotal dimension, if you will, because we really need to break through it in order to access the higher states of consciousness. Not just 5D, but 5D and beyond. We talk a lot about 5D because 5D is really the portal to higher states of consciousness. And the way we experience 4D is when we are awakening spiritually, when we're healing, when we're realizing that we're more than this physical body. And then we're accessing our past wounds and healing past traumas from this lifetime and even from other lifetimes, past and future. To understand a little better, let's go back to 3D, right? So I'll give you 3 pillars of the 3D consciousness. So the 3D consciousness is the 3rd dimension, is where we live, and when we incarnate here, we are given this 3D level of consciousness, which is quite limiting. And so because we're talking, since the 4D is the realm of the collective mind, let's focus on the mind of the 3D individual. So I'll give you 3 pillars. And I would love for you to imagine a triangle being formed by those 3 pillars. So number 1 is unconscious mind, 2 is the conscious mind, and 3 is the subconscious mind. So imagine that little triangle in your mind. So number 1, unconscious, is when the mind is asleep, when we are unaware of the spiritual realm, of the non-physical, right? Which is perhaps where we've been for most of the time, individually and as a collective, but this has been changing. And then number 2, the conscious. That's when we self-realize, we become self-aware. We are beginning our awakening journey. We're starting to become more interested in self-growth and self-development, and we can start to actually make some sense and actually rationalize with our mind who we are beyond the physical realm. And then 3, the subconscious mind. And that's where the magic happens. That's where we can access our traumas, our fears, our limiting beliefs, everything that's been conditioned to us. And consequently, we can also access our limitless inner potential, right? It's not just about the traumas and the fears as if this is something bad, but when we go through that, when we access our darkness, or imagine the darkness in the subconscious mind as like the depths of the ocean, that's where the healing and the actualization of spirituality happen. Okay? So the subconscious mind is the portal to the 4D. Any kind of holistic healing that you do or you may have done actually has you accessing your own subconscious mind. And you can do that through meditation, breath work, sound healing, past life regression, hypnotherapy. You can access a theta state of conscious. And I can talk more about it. I don't want to go there, but maybe I'll do another episode on the brain waves and how we can access the subconscious mind. Let me know if you would like that. But going back to, the shift from 3D to 4D, and bear in mind, and I say this all the time, but I'll say that again, we're not leaving or getting rid of the 3D. We are just expanding our consciousness because we have that ability. And the more we heal, the more we evolve as human beings and souls, the more we expand our consciousness, the more aware we become, and we expand our minds and basically the perception of ourselves. In 4D, I'll give you now 4 pillars. So in 3D, I gave you 3. That's unconscious, conscious, and subconscious. You imagine a little triangle. And now we've accessed the subconscious. I'm taking you a little journey here. Now that you've accessed your subconscious mind, I'll give you 4 pillars for the 4D. And I would like you to imagine a square being formed. So number 1 is expression. Number 2 is experimentation. Number 3 is integration. And number 4 is transcendence. I'll say that again. Number 1 is expression, taking you to number 2, experimentation, taking you to number 3, integration, and taking you to number 4, transcendence. So we can see these pillars, or even phases, if you will, within this lifetime, or even as the whole lifetime, or as many lifetimes. So wait, I'll explain. So first, let's think about ourselves within this lifetime as we perceive ourselves to be. So the expression can be an event in your life, or something that you create or have created, something that you do or have done. So for instance, let's say a relationship, okay? A relationship that you have in this life. So the relationship is the expression itself, okay? It's the expression of a desire or of love. Then the experimentation is how this relationship evolves. Then integration would be what this relationship has taught you and what it has brought to your life. Okay? And then transcendence would be the realization and the gift that this relationship has brought to your life, which could be perhaps the end of it and the beginning of a new cycle in your life. Or it could also be, for instance, the birth of a child. Okay? And then we could also see this as a lifetime, just life itself. So then you are the expression, okay? And your whole life, the journey of life, this human experience, is the experiment. Then your healing is the integration. You understand why you came to this life. You start healing those past wounds. You start becoming more and more aligned with your purpose. So that's the integration. And then transcendence would be your death, because it's actually a new cycle for the soul to evolve. All right? But transcendence can also mean shifting into 5D in this lifetime. Yes. Because remember that square with 4 pillars, and I asked you to imagine a square. Imagine that when you transcend, there is a new point up in the middle, and that square is transformed into a pyramid. So that top of the pyramid represents 5D. I talk more about shifting into 5D consciousness again on that 2-part episode, and I'll put links in the description below. And now, just a side note here, imagine that the cycle of the 4 pillars, expression, experimentation, integration, and transcendence, repeats itself so that the soul evolves. The soul experiences many lifetimes and learns its lessons, and it can eventually choose to express itself as something else on a different planet or a different dimension, as a different being, as a star or planets even. Yes, you can be that evolved to become a planet, because it's all about the evolution here. So we're going really up there right now. I started talking about the evolution of your mind, the evolution of yourself as a human being, but now we're talking about the evolution of the soul. And remember that the soul is part of the collective, and that's the ROM that we are. The 4D is the ROM of the collective. When you evolve, everybody else evolves, everything else evolves. Right, now I hope you're still with me. And by now you might be asking yourself, what does the Akashic Records have to do with all of this? So the Akashic Records is basically the records of all of this that I'm talking about. It's, the direct translation of Akasha is the word meaning upper sky or space in Hinduism. So some people call it the book of life. I'd like to see it as data bank, or I like to see it, my favorite is the library of the universe. So imagine it's like this huge library that contains the records of all of your soul's journey, again individually and collectively. So all of the history of humanity, the future, our thoughts, our feelings, our traumas, and not just from this planet, but also other planets and galaxies. So can you see the correlation between the 4D and the Akashic records here? So when we access our Akashic records, we access information from our soul's journey, information from this lifetime or past or even future, because remember, the 4D is the realm of the expanded time. So past, present, future are all in the same library. Okay? Now, I just want to give you a side note here. Barbara Handclough, on her book, again, the information that she channeled from the Pleiadians, she mentions that the first dimension is also where the Akashic records are. She does say that it's in the fourth dimension, but also in the first dimension. And Matthias de Stefano mentions in his show that the 8D, the eighth dimension, is where the Akashic records are. So from my personal view and my personal interpretation, and I'm just going to speak this from intuition, there's no research on that. The way I see it is that the Akashic records are actually, well, it has different levels of dimensions too. And the first dimension is the iron core crystal that sort of started the earth. And the way I see it is as if consciousness itself solidified itself in order to create the planet. So I imagine that this core crystal is just containing all of the information from the cosmos. So like records from the beginning of time as planet Earth, or even as other planets. We're talking about planet Earth here, so we don't get too confused. And then Matthias mentions the 8th dimension, and I'm not sure if it's the same dimension that Barbara describes and the Pleiadians describe, but in her book, the 8th dimension is basically the realm of light, in the realm of God's consciousness. And so when I think about it, I imagine that it's kind of the same information or the same library, let's say, as the first one. It's just that the first one is like a closed library, and the 8th one is where you can get information not just from this planet, but from the cosmos. I think that anyone that is able to access the Akashic records in the 8th dimension, like Matthias is able to bring information from ancient civilizations and higher dimensional races and other galaxies. And so I guess that the 4D Akashic records is the closest to us. So that's where we access it. It's more of like an easier access because it's closer to us. It's closer to the 3D. So that's just a side note that was almost like the whole podcast episode. All right. So finally, I want to tackle the last question, which is what can this awareness do for you? All right. So accessing your Akashic records can give you clarity on certain fears, traumas, limiting beliefs, or even why you've gone through certain things in this life. It can bring healing to those areas in your life, and you're healing stuff not just from this life. Again, we carry stuff from other lifetimes, even from lives outside of this planet. It can also give you some guidance on your next steps. And though we do have free will, we can actually skip timelines and accelerate the course of the evolution of our souls. It can help you contact and communicate with your spirit guides, the librarians in the Akashic records. And from my experience, having a life review or a past life reviews can be extremely, extremely healing because it brings some sense of peace and understanding for where you are now. And also you can learn and experience oneness, because remember, your records are part of the collective. So the pain that you've experienced is also someone else's pain. And in that sense, the pain and the trauma connect us all. The same way that our expansion and our evolution also affects the collective. That's why I always like to bring these topics and teachings to you, to yourself. It's all about looking within, taking care of yourself and nurturing that self-love. The more each one of us does this, the more we are all going to evolve as a collective. And now you're probably asking how we can access our Akashic records or the 4D for that matter. And it's through the expansion of your consciousness, through healing, through a spiritual practice, etc. And I know that sounds very general, but that's really what it is. And it's fair to say this. Some of you, I know that's true for me, might have already accessed it. You just didn't call it Akashic or 4D. If you have been practicing meditation, breath work, or you have experienced before any kind of like out-of-body experiences or astral travel or plant medicine, etc., you definitely have accessed the 4D and the Akashic records, and consequently a lot of healing and transcendence. So it's important here to note that to point out that accessing the Akashic records, for me at least, should be a personal journey, because you can have someone say to you things, but it's not until you actually feel it through one of those experiences that you can actually heal. And so I offer group breathwork and meditation classes every month. And this month, this is the month of April, we are going to journey ourselves into the 4D and the Akashic records. So I'm going to guide you into, first of all, accessing the 4D and just having whatever experience you may be ready for, you need at this time through the Akashic records. And the breathwork part of the session enables you to access your subconscious mind, which is something that I talked in the beginning of the podcast, and it really puts you in that theta state of mind. That's the perfect state for you to access your subconscious mind. And it also, the breath helps you cleanse and release any stagnant energy that might be preventing you from, flying, let's say, going higher. And in that state, you can access those really deep parts of yourselves and be able to go deep into this metaphysical journey through 4D consciousness and the Akashic records. The classes are always saved and available for rent on my website. So it doesn't matter if you're listening to this in the future. Whenever you're listening to this, you can access the classes at www.willcaminata.com/events. All right. So the most important takeaway that I'd love for you to leave with is that we are always evolving. Our soul is always evolving, and our soul is evolving through the human experience that we are having right here, right now, and many other infinite experiences. We can always choose to see the bigger picture and choose to be better than yesterday, choose to heal, not just for ourselves, but for the collective. Choose to evolve and grow, knowing that the whole universe is evolving with you and because of you. If you resonated with the show and my podcast, please share it with that one friend who will love this topic too. And you can follow me on Instagram at GuyWill where I share a lot of content related to the expansion of consciousness and the awakening and the healing journey. And I'm also on Insight Timer, the app. You can find me there under my name, Will Caminada, and I'll leave all the links on the show's notes. Thank you so much for listening to my podcast, and as always, keep shining your light, keep your heart open, and let love lead the way. I love you. See you in the next episode.